Hello, everyone. My name is Shari Kroll. I am the proud executive director of StreetWise Partners. Thank you for joining us for cocktails. A few technical tips before we start. All attendees are in listen-only mode, which means your microphones are muted. Please use the chat box for any technical issues or general commentary. Feel free to share your LinkedIn URL to stay connected, and please use the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for the panelists. We will monitor these and address them towards the end of our session. So this is our final event in a long day of celebration. We were up bright and early at 9 a.m. and we've shifted from coffee to cocktails. So I hope you all have some wine in hand. This morning we had an incredible panel in which we explored how we can all prepare and adapt to the new world of work. This was followed by micro-mentoring, where senior leaders worked with alumni of our program. And tonight we're going to hear from two incredible business pioneers. For those of you who have joined us for all three events, we are so grateful. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, welcome. As I mentioned this morning, this event looked very different just 3 months ago. What was an in-person breakfast fundraiser became virtual with content tailored to the new COVID world. And in the last 10 days, we've seen conversations about race come to the forefront of our community. Conversations that we've been having at StreetWise and working through for years, as structural racism pervades every fabric of our society. Our organization was built on the principle of equity. We know that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. For those who've hit the traditional milestones, graduating college or a training program, they are still at a disadvantage because of where they were born, what they look like, or the communities they represent. They can lack access to opportunities, professional skills, and social capital. We know there's still so much more that we need to do, but we are proud of our efforts over the past 23 years, aiming for a society in which hard work and self-determination is enough for career success. For those of you who are new to StreetWise, we are one of the only workforce development organizations in the country that offers mentoring to adults. Over a 13-week program, we connect mentees and mentors. Week 1 is building the career map. Week 2 is building the resume. Week 3 is building the LinkedIn profile. Week 4 is drafting the elevator pitch, and on and on. But because we know it takes a professional community to grow your career, we match every mentee with not one, but 2 mentors to double their network, double their knowledge, double the impact right from the start. And then every one of these mentoring triads is part of a cohort that brings together 25 mentees and 50 mentors. Pre-COVID, when these cohorts met, it was in the conference rooms of some of the top companies in the world: Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank, PwC, KPMG. Today, our cohorts meet virtually with hundreds of mentees and mentors growing and learning together. This is how we close the professional community gap. Today, we have mentored 7,000 adults in New York, DC, and Detroit with the support of over 12,000 volunteers. 70% of the people who graduate our program become employed, and even better, their salaries grow on average by 400%. We all know that a job represents more than just a paycheck. It is your sense of purpose, is your reason to get up in the morning. And given what's going on in the world today, our mission has never been more relevant. Thank you to our incredible sponsors who've shared their generosity today. We will include a donation link in the chat box should you feel generous as well. And most people know that I can go on and on about this mission that I love, but I feel like it's even more powerful to hear from a mentee and a mentor, and actually one mentee and 2 mentors about their experiences. So please join me in watching this short video on StreetWise.
Jamie's gonna have whatever future she wants. But I think it takes a lot of confidence building for people to see that whatever door they want, with the right opportunity, the right networking, the right tenacity, they can go out and they can get it.
My name is Jamie. Currently, I'm a senior at Pace University studying finance. I was born and raised in Harlem, raised by my mom primarily. I knew that I wanted to study finance in college. However, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do because I didn't have the resources that many other people do. I didn't really know anyone who had worked in finance to ask. One of my friends had been in StreetWise at the time, and he recommended that I apply to the program. When I first started StreetWise, I felt that I was lacking confidence. And then I met Ben, my mentor.
It was pretty clear immediately that Jamie had all the talent in the world. I was immediately impressed by how much she really wanted to develop from a professional standpoint.
Ben and I had such a great connection. I learned so much from him. He challenged me every day. I remember once or twice a week he'd call me just to quiz me on what's going on in the market. He answered any of my questions, and he really just made me feel more confident overall.
It was about confidence in the way she told her story, in how she put the pieces together for folks that she was meeting.
One day, Ben told me, I see that you're making a lot of progress. I want to take that to the next level. I want you to cold call one person from the StreetWise directory on LinkedIn.
And Jamie did like a simple matching where she said, all right, Ben works at Citi. Who else volunteers at StreetWise and works at Citi now?
I've read through so many profiles, and for some reason, this one woman stood out to me. Her name was Kate. I was so nervous to write her this email, and it took like 30 minutes to write it, one email.
I think I showed up at my desk one morning, and I'm getting a call from someone in HR, which is never a good sign, and it's someone I don't know. And she's like, do you know Jamie? And I'm like, yeah, of course I know Jamie. Well, she called me, and she's setting up coffee, and I love her, and we're gonna get her a job. And I was like, this is fantastic.
I got a message from this very chipper freshman at Pace, and she just impressed at a different level.
She and I sat down, we completely meshed.
And from that day on, we never stopped talking.
Kate is so special, and her spirit is just so kind and generous. She's a great mentor.
Jamie just wanted to work at Citi really, really badly. So that was always the goal. Get an interview for sophomore leadership program.
It's essentially a feeder program for folks still in college.
And work here.
Kate and I kind of formed a team, and we were on Team Jamie.
She is a bottle of energy, and she is just Miss Charisma, but you put her in front of an interviewer, and it's nerves. So we both lined up meetings for her to prep and practice.
I learned how to just speak more eloquently and slowly and to articulate myself better.
And it gets time for interview day, and Jamie does really well. She does fantastically. But there's a call from Kate. You and I have to call Jamie.
She didn't get it. It was devastating. The program was really competitive, but the main feedback was she didn't have enough examples of teamwork.
We had a conference call, me, Kate, and Jamie, and saying, look, you didn't get the first thing, but we have a year until the junior summer internship interview process begins. How many people can you network with? And to show that you have the teamwork and the leadership.
Ben knew private bank. I knew the HR side, so she met with, I think, half of private bank and half of HR just to get ready for those interviews.
She's ready to take every opportunity that's open to her. And Jamie ended up getting a job at Trader Joe's over the summer.
She came to me and said, Kate, every hour you join a new team. And so I could have teamwork examples. Come on, this is someone you want working at Citi.
This July, I'll be starting at Citi's private bank as an analyst. I'm just so confident that Citi is the right place for me.
It gives me all the joy in the world to know that Jamie's someone that I've known for 4 or 5 years, and in her new position can really rely on and still be a mentor and advocate.
Ben and I talked about this. We're going to have to be careful not to be mother hens about it. We can't check in and see how she's doing too much.
It has been so special to have 2 support systems in a professional setting here for me. I think Ben helped me with more of the technical aspects, whereas Kate kind of helped me on the emotional side. And without Ben or Kate, I wouldn't be where I am today. I promised myself that once I started working for at least 2 years, I would be a mentor at StreetWise. I promised that I would love to change someone's lives in the same way that Ben and Kate have changed mine.
So Jamie is just one of the hundreds of mentees, and you can see how incredible they are and what joy it brings to us to be able to help them through their journey. I know that the film lagged a little bit through Zoom, and so we're gonna make sure we send it out after this event in case you wanna rewatch it and learn more about Jamie's story. So I'm super excited to introduce our incredible moderator for this evening, Michelle Steele. Michelle is an ESPN reporter since 2011 and joins us today from her home in Chicago. So thank you, Michelle. Prior to ESPN, Michelle has experience anchoring and reporting for Bloomberg Television and Forbes, covering the U.S. economy and contributing to business programming. Michelle, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sherry. Hopefully everybody can hear me. And thanks to everybody out in the audience who's joining us today. One of the most sacred rituals I have every day is happy hour. So I'm happy to share this with the rest of you and for such a great cause. As Sherry said, my name is Michelle Steele, and a friend of mine who works at ESPN asked if I'd be available to host today's chat. I was happy to accept. And by the way, that was a little bit over a week ago, and little did I know how much the world really would change in just over a week. So listening to Sherry talk about how this event had changed over the last 3 months just reminds me how quickly things can change in this world and how resilient and how adaptable we need to be to adapt to all of the changes. So a little bit about me, Sherry told you a little bit about my career. I've been at ESPN since 2011. I can't believe it's been almost 10 years. Before that, I was at Bloomberg News in New York. So I feel like I can relate to those of you who are making a career change or who are trying to break into a new field. My family, my mom is Filipino, so I'm first generation immigrant on one side of the family. She came here from the Philippines in the early 70s, part of that kind of first tidal wave of immigrants to come from Asia, and spent her career in the pharmaceutical industry. My dad's Caucasian. He's white. He's from Washington, D.C., and his ancestors were originally Mormon. They came here for religious reasons. So in a lot of ways, I feel like my personal story is sort of emblematic of the American story. And I want to provide my support off the top for what you guys are doing today by bettering yourselves and, importantly, your families through knowledge and through hard work. So we've got two guys who are acquainted with both of those things, two people closely involved with the mission of StreetWise today, and I'm going to introduce them. Anton Levy, who's co-president and managing director of General Atlantic, and Neil Barua is CEO of ServiceMax. It's a leading global technology firm, and they've been mentors and have mentored themselves, so they can give us today some useful insights for people because they have been on both sides of the equation. So Anton and Neil, I want to say it would be a gross understatement to call 2020 just a little bit eventful. But before we kind of get into the granular details surrounding the events of 2020, I want you guys to give us a little recap of your background so the audience knows who you are, where you came from, a little bit more about your family and what makes you you. So Anton, let's start with you.
Sure. So good afternoon, early evening for all you folks. And Michelle, thank you for agreeing to do this, and Neil as well. I've maybe just 30 seconds on myself, and then I'll just spend 30 seconds on my background with StreetWise. So in terms of myself, I was born going all the way back. I promise this will be only 30 seconds, but going all the way back. We're
not going to hold you to it, but okay.
When I was 2, it's gonna be about a full hour. I'm gonna tell you about my background. I was born in South Africa many years ago. Immigrated to the United States when I was 2. So I am an immigrant to the U.S., but as you can tell from my accent, I'm reasonably Americanized. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., and went to school at University of Virginia and then Columbia was at Morgan Stanley for a stint, and then I've spent most of my career professionally at General Atlantic, where I've been for 22 years now, and I'm still there. I guess they can't seem to get rid of me quite yet. And in terms of StreetWise, I've gotten involved. I was a mentor back again about 24 years ago when I was at Morgan Stanley. I was lucky enough to be involved with the program for a while then, and I got to had a great experience, had a great mentee and partner, and loved the program. And then I was also lucky enough to meet one of the co-founders, Matt Gorin, who I became very close friends with, and found out that he and Rahul, who I also became friends with, had started StreetWise, and they were kind enough to ask me to join the board and then become chairman. And I've been chairman of StreetWise for the past 6 years or so, which has been a real honor and pleasure. And I get to work with amazing people on the staff and have real impact on people's lives, as I think you're seeing in these videos. And from those of you who've gotten to know StreetWise, the huge impact we have with changing lives and outcomes. So it's been a real honor.
And Neil, before you start, I just want to remind everybody that you can send questions to us in the webinar chat right to the right of the screen. So feel free to send questions and we'll get to as many as we can. Neil?
Great. No, thanks for everyone joining. I know it's been a long day and we're really looking forward to the dialogue. And Anton's a tough act to follow. He's known as the godfather of the technology industry. So I'm really glad to be here together with him. Just quick way of background. I've got 2 kids, a 5- and 7-year-old. So if you see them running in, I think the new way that we all work now is to be the real us. And so the family could be coming in and out, and I could be assigned lawnmower duties very soon here. But as way of background, I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada. My father and mother came from India, a very remote part of India called Assam. For those of you tea lovers, that's where a lot of the tea is grown. And my father made a big leap of faith and left his large family and came to Canada and brought my mother along shortly thereafter. I've got a sister who's a couple years older, and I now currently live in Menlo Park, California. I've lived all around the world, quite frankly, over the last 20 years personally, and came to the United States right before high school and spent my time in New York City and in the surrounding tri-state area and in multiple schools. Quick fun fact is since 6th grade or 5th grade, I've moved schools every year up through high school. And part of the reason why I really got fascinated by what StreetWise does and some of the impacts we could make collectively all together. Went to NYU downtown in New York City, and then ultimately went through a bunch of different roles, not only in finance, but also went into the corporate world. And now have come back into running a great company that Anton teams up with in Silver Lake, another private equity investor, bought a company, and now I'm the CEO of a company that does a lot of great things to help technicians and engineers, as we call it, keep the world running. So really happy to be here and enjoyed to have the dialogue.
And Neil, I hope that you don't mind me asking about this, but there was a really fun fact. I know you mentioned one already, but there was one really, really fun one that you mentioned the other day on our prep call for this. Something about your father winning a prize, I believe, when you guys were living in Montreal.
You're going deep now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, it was very fun.
I'll see. It didn't turn out to be that fun, but it was fun at the time. So my father, before my sister and I were born, at the young old age of around 30, when he just came to Canada, and he's a food technician, so he worked in food plants, and he always got a lotto ticket, and he hit it big, and he won the lottery in Montreal, Canada, that is now probably in today's dollars in the multiple millions of dollars. And interestingly, and my sister and I gave him a lot of crap since we dealt with a lot of struggles starting in 5th grade onwards. He spent all the money, literally every dime of it, on buying restaurants, cars, whatever, a 30-year-old man does that just came from India into Canada. He didn't save any of it, and he gave it, fortunately, a lot to charity, which was a great thing. But later on in life, when we were going through a lot of the stuff that we as a family had to deal with, which was not easy, my sister and I would keep telling him, if you just save 10% of that, we wouldn't have to move every year. So that being said, I'm really glad he enjoyed the time and made the most of it, and helped a few people along the way as well.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I bring it up, and thank you so much for sharing that with the rest of us, is it was so interesting to hear you, to hear it being such a formative experience for you. You know, I think from the outside looking in, you hear about someone winning the lottery and you immediately think, well, all their problems sort of just must have dissipated with this money parachuting down from the skies on them. But it created some issues, and it ended up, you know, having an effect on the rest of your life also. Let's talk about the events of the last week, the elephant in the room. You know, I mentioned at the very top of this that a little bit over a week ago, the world was a little bit different. At the same time, I think what happened to George Floyd and the horrific nature of the video and the horrific way that he was killed have changed the world, and did not happen in a vacuum. There were other things, whether it's Ahmaud Arbery or Amy Cooper in Central Park. This is a question for either of you as leaders in both of your organizations. How have you processed the events of the last few weeks?
Anton, I'll jump in. Look, I think it's really appropriate for all of us to be aware of each other, that we're all really hurting, and everyone's in a different stage of hurt. And but like as a country and as people and as human beings, I think we're all hurting. And some of the things we're doing at ServiceMax is this has just elevated what has been, we believe, been things that we've been trying to get better at for a number of years as people in corporate America. But I think the last number of weeks has heightened the urgency and the not nice to have, but the must have to really sort this out. And I think what we started doing at ServiceMax, I actually had a all hands meeting yesterday across the world for anyone that wants to come. And you know, we have a number of employees in the Black community within ServiceMax, and part of this was just let's listen and feel what each other is going to, and go down to the basic level that we're all ultimately human beings. And that was just like it was literally tear-filled. We were all crying, myself included, on just hearing the rawness of what people have experienced. And I have to admit, the colleagues, and I'm going to segment them out, but they also have differences that they have to deal with. But some of the members of my leadership team who are white males, they were like blown away that how can this be like, and they were tearful about it. And ultimately, I think this is going to be a long process, but I'm actually optimistic that while we'll go through a lot of pain to get better at each step over the next number of months, years, decades, that this is a seminal moment to start understanding that we all have the same color of blood running through our veins, and to get to being and understanding that we're all human beings without all the other things that we all built up since we were born is the core. If we could understand that each other, I think it makes it, one, a better place for us to be in, and two, I think creates a lot better of a playing field by which people could do things based on what they could do themselves versus, you know, the status that they are, their color of their skin. But this is just a really long way of saying we don't really know, but right now we're listening, we're learning, and we're just trying to feel like what each other is feeling and has gone through. And I think that that's going to result in good education and inspiration to get better.
I'll just add a little bit. I mean, I think Neil said it really, really well, and what a lot of us feel. You know, I came from, I mentioned this very briefly in my introduction. I was born in South Africa, which has a long history of racial injustice. It's why my parents left. They were protesters against what the government was doing back in the apartheid days and so on and so forth. And so I think, we've seen firsthand how that can rip apart a society and the injustices that can create. And I echo what Neil said. I hope this is a wake-up call. I think, I think a lot of us are aware of the issues and the problems and have tried to take steps forward, but it's not nearly enough. And I think, hopefully the bright positive side of the last couple of weeks is that we're not going back to where we've come from, and that we can use this as a chance to make real change, not just talk about it, and then 2 weeks from now we're in the same place we were a month ago. I think hopefully we can take real concrete steps, make real change, and significantly move us forward. I think we all, all the people I know around StreetWise and otherwise, it's just unacceptable. It's gone on for too long, and we need to use this as a turning point to change behaviors, attitudes, and results. And I think it needs to be concrete results that all of us commit to. So again, hopefully, from a glasses half full perspective, we can use this as a real turning point.
Yeah, everybody I've taught, I'm in sports, but sports in a lot of ways is essentially covering many smaller businesses. I call them billion-dollar mom and pops sometimes, just because the hierarchy is so truncated. But every person that I've talked to, and certainly a lot of players and coaches have all said it's individual action, but it's collective effort, and certainly collective results. Neil, I was listening to you talk about your background, and you mentioned that when you were at NYU, you worked in sort of various finance positions. I'm just curious, and I mentioned Amy Cooper earlier. She worked for Franklin Templeton. Did you experience any discrimination at any level? Because of the color of your skin, your background, what have you?
Yeah, it's a good question. My dad, who was my first mentor, actually, just always drilled into my head that you're always going to have to outwork someone else because you're not as smart as them. And I started playing soccer, you're not as quick as them, and you're not as strong as them. And just like whether it was a good thing or bad thing, I look back at it very fondly, but it just made me outwork. And I knew that was a place where I could go to, which is regardless of feeling slighted or feeling rejected in certain cases. And I did feel moving schools every year, I obviously felt very ostracized, as many cases I'd go to schools that I was a very small minority in terms of color, in terms of the school. But I kept going back to, I could actually get better by staying up later and reading more books, or going to the library and doing more until closing, and getting up earlier and doing things a bit more than everyone else. And that was just the inspiration. And I didn't take any kind of criticism. While I think now looking back, I dealt with it a decent amount, but I didn't let it get to me too much. And I'm sure it's got probably long-term mental things I got to sort with, but at the time it was just straight hustle will beat all those issues that I might be feeling that might not make me feel great.
And within that context, then, how important were mentorships to you, to your career?
Yeah, I owe almost everything I've got to mentors that came at very interesting and important points and junctures in my life. And as I said, without my father, without my mother too, who is equally as hardworking despite the struggles that we had, they gave me a lot of courage to keep doing what I was doing. But then as I went into the corporate world, the main one that really speaks the most, which is still one of my closest friends and my most prominent mentors that really inflected my career, was John Ledger, who's was the CEO of T-Mobile. Now he just left recently. I worked with him for 11 years at a telecom company at an early age, and he was a mentor that I just watched, and he brought me along to watch him in doing his craft. And that made a big difference of seeing someone at a high level perform, and gave me exposure and experiences that I would have never gotten at that young age. And so he gave me a backbone. But to answer your question, mentors have been critical. I'll segment one point before I switch over. Is there's mentors like John who literally never told me what to do. He let me watch him and brought me into situations by which I could observe a lot of things. So call it an apprentice model was his strength. And he always pushed me harder at each and every way and treated me differently to push and excel at what I was doing. There was other mentors that were just support mentors, the ones that we all need that say, hey, you're good, I believe in you, and keep going, or show up to that meeting despite your insecurities. And we all need those. And I have a few of those, including my wife partner. And so those are important. Then I've got like mentors who are good judgment people. Like, hey, I'm looking to go to this company. What do you think? And within 10 minutes, they kind of dissect it. I'll give you one example. Anton Levy, who I met during a job transition. Someone introduced me to him, and I went to his office in General Atlantic, and we had a good conversation. And he didn't know this, but at the time, I was very insecure that I couldn't be a CEO of another company. I felt like I let the company that I was working at down. And I went to go meet with him, and we had a good conversation. And he told me that, hey, there's this company down in Florida. You could easily be CEO of that company, but you should probably do something bigger. And he didn't know it at the time, but when I left, I had my chest out and I said, that guy believes I could be another CEO. Like, I should be a CEO. And he, I never mentioned this to you, Anton, but that, like, those things make a difference. And I went, and now I'm a CEO again. And a good part of that was that one walk I had after I left saying, hey, this guy who's the titan of this industry said I could be someone who, like 30 minutes ago, I thought I couldn't be. And those things make a difference. So sorry to be long-winded, but the long way of saying mentors are pretty much, and friendships are pretty much the reason why I'm here.
Yeah. Anton, I see a smile on your face listening to Neil. What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, look, that's very kind of Neil to say. I was thinking when you said that, I think I was trying to recruit Neil to be CEO of one of our companies. So I think he misheard me. I was trying to get him into a GA company. But no, look, that's very kind of Neil to say. And, you know, look, just to build on, first of all, Neil is an incredible talent. He's being very humble, and that was an easy comment to make at the time. And he's only proved it true. And so I may recruit Neil. I won't tell the Silver Lake guys, but I may still try and recruit Neil in the future. But I guess, you know, maybe just to, Michelle, if I could build on the mentorship question a little bit, I think almost I'd go even further to say, I don't know, it's possible to be really successful without mentors. You know, I mean, I think you asked for some examples of where you had mentors, but I struggled, I think, across my career and life. And I think if I hadn't had mentors, I don't think I would have had a fraction of the success that I've had. I mean, everything from initially my parents, and, you know, and Neil mentioned his father and his parents, but, you know, every time that I would get off course, which was probably a lot when I was young, you know, they would kind of nudge you back and say, you know, either pump you up a little bit, or, you know, pick you up when you're down, or say, hey, you know what, no more video games, go do the math homework, or whatever the comment was at the time, little things like that, all the way to saying, hey, you can do this, aim higher, you're good enough, and helped you build your confidence. And I think about every different step, whether it was in college, there was a professor I remember really, really specifically that, you know, really ended up shifting my thinking in terms of career and possibilities and aspirations to every job I've had. There's been, you know, one or multiple people who really put me on their shoulders and took me under their wing for various reasons. I was lucky to have that and those people. And, you know, again, I wouldn't have a fraction of the success and luck I've had without all these other people. And the last thing I'd say is, you know, for those who are, you know, younger folks on the phone that are maybe searching for mentors, you know, people like, I imagine, you know, speaking for Neil, but for sure myself, you know, one of the great pleasures of what we do is to mentor people. It's so enjoyable. There's so many talented people out there that are good people, really smart, ambitious, that, you know, one of the highlights of what we do is to spend time and watch those people grow and take on more responsibility and be successful. So, you know, I think, you know, often we talk about the benefits to the mentee, but, you know, I'd say equally as much, it's one of the pleasures of my professional life is really watching the people. You know, a lot of those people have ended up leaving General Atlantic over the years and have gone on to great success. And those that are still with me, it's probably the most enjoyable thing that a lot of us do. So I would, you know, for those on the phone that are younger, seek out mentors and give them an opportunity, because usually they're getting as much out of it as you are.
Well, we have a couple questions from the audience related to seeking out mentors. You know, we all watched the video of the mentee who essentially cold emailed someone, and that helped her kind of get a foot in the door at Citi. Anton, do you have any tips for people on the phone, the younger people on the phone, in terms of finding a mentor, getting a mentor?
You know, I think I do. I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that someone had mentioned to me many years ago, probably a mentor, I don't remember exactly which person this came from, but, you know, one of the ways to get close to people is sometimes to ask them for advice. You know, you may be like, well, that's odd, but, you know, people want to help. Most people are good people. They want to see people be successful. So if you said, hey, I've got, you know, even if you're almost creating a situation to get closer to someone, to say, hey, I'm thinking about this and I'd love your advice on my career, or I'd love your advice on this project. You know, just giving someone a chance to help you will often bring them closer to you. Because after that, they'll feel like they're helping you, whether they are helping you or not in every situation, maybe beside the point in some specific cases, but they'll start to take an interest. Not everybody, but if you say, hey, I'd love your advice and your counsel, you know, those are really powerful words to say to somebody, because most people, I think their human nature is to help. And so I would be proactive. And, you know, you can just say, and I think be sensitive to people's time, but maybe send a note to someone or walk by their office, be like, hey, is there any way I can pick your brain for 5 to 10 minutes? I'd really love to get your advice on something. I would say 9 out of 10 times, people are going to say they'd be thrilled to do that, and kind of feel flattered that you'd ask them for advice. You know, for a lot of people who are younger, you don't maybe fully appreciate, but those that you're asking for advice are no different from you. They're just, you know, maybe, you know, 10 years ahead in their career or 20 years ahead in their career, but they're just like you, just same as someone who was younger than you. If you're a 25-year-old, if a 15-year-old came to you and said, hey, I'd love your advice on X, Y, and Z, you'd help them. It's no different for the rest of us. And so again, I think that's maybe a way to start to build a relationship with somebody is use the advice angle.
Can you think of a specific example where someone has sort of either cold called you or cold emailed you and said something that worked? I mean, both of you guys have a tremendous amount of incoming every day. So sort of what's a message that stands out?
Well, and my advice, just to maybe be specifically clear, I mean, it doesn't have to be cold too. I was thinking often even someone who your work environment. So I think it can be cold, that's harder, but even somebody you don't know that well, you say, hey, you know, like for instance, sometimes people walk into my office and say, hi, I've been at General Atlantic for a few months. We haven't met yet. I work in XYZ area. Hey, I'd love to just get your advice on something. You know, that's easier where there's a connection and they can walk by my office or send me an email, but it's somebody I know, or someone from StreetWise, you know, might say, hey, Anton, I'm with StreetWise, I'm a mentor, I'm a mentee, and I'd love your advice. I think the cold, hey, I'm, you know, here's a LinkedIn link from, you know, and I get these, you know, probably a bunch of, you know, I'm
Sure.
so-and-so from have no connection at all. That's a little bit harder just because there's quite a number of those. I think trying to break out and make a connection to somebody makes it easier. So I don't have a magic, you know, here's the cold call. I think you got to try and find some connection if you can. That's not to say you can't cold call and cold email and people won't find time for you. I just think that that often there's a lot of those, and how do you break through the noise a bit is harder.
I'm often asked by people who want to break into journalism, you know, how to interview, and I always say scour someone's social media, find out what team they're a fan of. So at least if you're cold calling or cold emailing, you can make that connection. You know, we're both Bulls fans or what have you. Shout out, Neil. I know you're a huge Jordan fan. I'd say Jordan and not Bulls, because I'm not sure if you're a Bulls fan or just a Michael Jordan fan. But we all watched The Last Dance, so that's okay.
Twice already.
Twice? That's impressive. It's a 10-part series, Neil.
No one
I
sleeps
thought you were working hard over here. Okay.
There's too much anxiety these days. Can I just add one thing? Sorry, I think it's because I do get asked the same question. Adding everything that Anton said, one of the things that I think has helped quite a lot this could be a little controversial, but Anton mentioned building a relationship. And my view is early on, when you build that, when you walk by the office or you have that call, that you actually get connected to someone that might eventually become your mentor, be careful and be cognizant of what I call the annoying factor. Like, it's really important to not overdo the ask, I think. And in any good relationship, it needs to build. And I know that many of us are impatient and we want to go to Anton and say, hey, can you connect me to this company and get me a job, as an example. That might be the case, but it's corner cases where that occurs. But if you build a relationship with Anton or someone like myself, and we start understanding who you are, we build a personal tie to you somehow through interactions, then like when things come, there's bigger things that actually evolve through it. And my only main point here is those that come full swing and are a long email that says, here are all the things I need to do and things I need your help with, it's a bit of recoiling that occurs. And again, people are all different, but my own personal view is those that approach it with some subtlety and says, let's take steps to build the relationship. Ultimately, those have been the best mentees that I've had, are those ones that evolve in that manner. So for what it's worth, that's something I just give a piece of advice personally.
Yeah. And I think that's really useful. From the other side of the equation, so you guys having been mentors, there's a member of the audience who'd like to know, what are common mistakes you've seen leaders make when it comes to mentoring? Any best practices for those who are mentors?
Let me just start. I think a couple things is, if you do engage in being a mentor and it's real, there needs to be a follow-up. You need to make the time. And I've made a mistake on this multiple times. So on behalf of the few mentees that I didn't do this well in, is you got to show up for the match. If there's going to be a two-way street here, then I think that's really important, that you give it the importance that it deserves. And that ultimately creates a good trust factor and momentum of the relationship. And so that's my number one thing. And number two is not doing and not mentoring in the things that we might not be great at. And so I, early on in my career, when I was mentoring, thought I could answer all the questions. And as I've gotten older, maybe slightly wiser, is I now point them to other people that could do better in terms of talking about that topic. And so opening more doors, and that ultimately creates greater connections with that person.
You know, job seekers always have to be adaptable and always need to be resilient. And I think that was true 6 months ago, 10 years ago, but I think it's especially true now. Do you believe that those skills, I think being adaptable in particular, do you think you can cultivate that? Can you learn that, Anton?
Can you learn being adaptable?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I mean, I think many things can be learned and practiced. And I think experiences, whether those are learned or life experiences where you kind of grow from failure and maybe success, I think can define how you deal with situations. So I think people can evolve and grow. So I think absolutely, I'm a big believer in change, and that people can change and for the positive. So I think so. I think you got to be open-minded to change, to growing and learning from situations. And I think maybe being introspective on something that happened and saying, okay, that was an unfortunate situation, or I screwed that up really badly. I did the following things that I shouldn't have done. What can I learn from that and learn from that and grow? So I think absolutely that people can change and grow from situations. I know I have. I mean, I know there was, how you deal with disappointment.
Yeah. Can you talk about a time where you've had to lean, you've had to lean on being resilient, you've had to lean on being adaptable, and that kind of got you through a situation?
Yeah, no, there's lots. I mean, I think sometimes they're little things, sometimes they're big things, but, mistakes I've made in my career. I mean, this is, more from a professional perspective, but I've done on the personal side as well. Investments that I was competing to win, and I got beat. Sometimes I like to say, it was because, you know, in our business, sometimes people pay a higher price than you, but sometimes they don't. They actually pay the price you were at, and you just lost. And a lot of people don't like to talk about that or admit that. And I think sometimes you say, like, listen, I got beat, and nobody likes to lose. But how do you deal with that? And one of the things that I've become, and I hate losing, but you know, at the same time, I've learned to be a gracious loser. And I can't tell you the number of times where, you know, after I lose and I go back to, you know, in this case, maybe an entrepreneur or owner of the business where they chose another partner, and I'm incredibly grateful and just say, listen, you made a great choice. I totally get it. And, you know, 6 months later, 12 months later, they say, you know, the biggest mistake I made was not going with you. Now, do they really know it was a mistake not going with me? But I just think how I handled myself went with disappointment and a loss, that opportunity came back to me. And that happens more often than you would think. And so, you know, that's a change. When I was younger in my career, I would just be pissed and be like, take it personally and be angry. And you know, that got me nowhere. And you know, dealing with that disappointment over time, to turn it into a positive, I think has become a real asset.
I also think that the folks that I've met and worked with at StreetWise, the mentees here, those that, and I'm generalizing, that have dealt with some struggles on their personal life, whether it be their family or the economic situation, as much as, and please don't take this the wrong way, the strength and resilience that also caused for me, right? I'm so grateful that my father spent all the money of that lottery ticket. I'm really grateful. And I'm grateful that we went through that struggle. That resiliency of what Anton said, of getting punched and getting back up again, and all the songs that are written about it, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. To actually have that resiliency, it doesn't matter the skill sets you got. When I look at people coming into the company and the people I partner with, those that actually can get punched, because we all do, and it's never straight up, and can recover and not destroy relationships and be a gracious loser and still get better, those are the ones you want to go fight for. And I think it's a huge quality. And again, this organization, many of the people here are actually far more advanced than many people that I spend time with, that, you know, has had a nice upbringing that might not have allowed them to feel the resiliency that many of you guys have felt over the last number of years or decades. So I'm a big believer of it.
Yeah. It reminds me of something that Mike Bloomberg would say when I was working for his company, that he was much more interested in someone who, you know, flipped burgers at Burger King so that they could contribute to their family and get by, than somebody who had a really high profile internship in, you know, Switzerland for the summer, studying pharmaceuticals or something. You know, we wanted someone to show a little bit of that grit, of that resiliency. We have another question from the audience about the other, you know, world-changing events that have happened this year. How has your role at work shifted in the face of COVID? And do you feel that there's any positives that have come out of that situation?
No.
You can be short on that one. That's a short answer on that one. Yeah. Are there positives? Maybe not positives, but maybe silver linings for your organization.
I think there's a couple. I mean, I think you know, obviously, you know, a terrible thing that we're all experiencing. I do think there will be some changes, though, that come out of this that are long-standing. Like one of the things is on business travel, for example. I think because we've had a massive experiment where much of our country and much of the world professionally has moved to work from home, we've had this massive experiment around virtual business and interaction, just like we're doing here. And I think that forced experiment, if you will, while under unfortunate circumstances, is going to have real lasting change. So I think it's going to be more accepted to say, hey, rather than come get on a plane and fly out and see me for a 2-hour meeting or an hour meeting, I think it's going to be much more acceptable to say, hey, let's jump on a Zoom call. Yes, I want to meet you, but let's do a Zoom call. And I think that's okay and more accepted now, as people say, you know what, it's not as good as being in person, but it's pretty close. You know, it can be 80% of being in person. And so I think that's going to be a permanent change, which hopefully on a positive side leads to better lifestyle for people, where they don't need to live on planes quite as much. And it's not a sign of, oh, you're interested in doing business with me only if you get on a plane you can be very interested and committed and do a Zoom, either a Zoom call or a phone call or some other type of video call. So I think that one of the long-term implications, that's going to be a lot more acceptable, which hopefully from a positive will lead to people being able to work in different locations, maybe not be in the office quite as much, work remotely. You know, there'll still be the importance of camaraderie and personal interactions, but maybe it doesn't have to be 5 days a week or, 4 to 5 weeks a month. It could be a couple days a week and maybe less travel. So I think you're going to see real changes in what's acceptable from a business relationship perspective.
I think it's also awesome. Our CMO here, Stacey Epstein, wrote it. She does a lot on women leadership. And I think the aspect that all of us, Anton, myself, now that we're at home and watching, how do we actually deal with kids getting homeschooled, those of us with kids, and the impact of dealing with kids and all the things that happen in the home. I think that acceptance of not worrying, like I joked with the kids coming in, I think there was always an anxiety around, can I leave early so I can pick up the kids? And now it's like, who cares? Like, we all are now in each other's homes, and we all know how much pressure there is to be not only a great executive and a great person in a company, but also a mother, father, uncle, aunt, whatever it may be. And I think I think there's going to be material advancement on women and leadership in across corporate America because of this. And I think a comfort level that this has caused for people to be who they are, candidly, and getting the most of them. So I'm actually really pumped about that aspect of what might happen.
Yeah. I think that a lot of organizations sort of throw around the words diversity and inclusion all the time without really examining the definition. And when you talk about, bringing your whole self to work, that is inclusion. Feeling like you can disclose, like, well, I'm watching my kids most of the day because they're not in school right now, and not feeling that you're going to be judged negatively for that in a workplace. Are there, sticking with the coronavirus theme for a second here, do you feel like, as far as inclusion is concerned, do you feel like that's something that you are reevaluating right now, Neil, that you will let more employees, say, work from home and deal with the family stuff, or that you've changed workflow significantly to accommodate people?
I've been personally slightly on the lenient side of this before COVID. I'm a big going to the office personally. I don't do well. I've learned now to be a bit more effective working from home, but I was always in the office or on an airplane type of person. And I think from what's happened at ServiceMax, we have about close to 1,000 employees across the world. And I think what we're thinking through is it's working. And what we do miss, though, and we're trying to figure this out, is the interaction piece. There's a social element of being able to see someone and just be and seeing the full body that I think you can never get away from. But I think there's going to be, at least out here, I live in California, there is a huge shift. I think we as a company are going to be probably more the midpoint, not the Twitter that says work from home for the rest of your lives. But I think there's going to be a big balance, and there's going to be far more flexibility, which is actually awesome, because I think this levels the playing field on, you don't need to live in high price Silicon Valley to get this job. You could be living in lower cost parts of the world and country to have an equal chance to get the role. And I actually think it's going to help employers and great employees that might not have the opportunity if they didn't live in the right locale.
I think we only have time for one more question. This is an interesting one. Anton, has there ever been a time when you felt a mentor let you down? How did you deal with it? Have you ever fired your mentor? You ever let go a mentor?
I mean, I have, although it wasn't so much me firing him so much. I mean, I'll make it short, but when I was looking to join General Atlantic, coming out of the analyst program at Morgan Stanley, I was lucky enough to have a couple of job offers, and I at some different private equity firms, and I didn't know the difference really between them. And the reason I ended up really choosing General Atlantic among two other really good options is that the guy who was running recruiting who I won't say his name, but he said, listen, you'll come work for me. It'll be great. I'll take care of you. You'll be my guy, and I'll take care of you. And that really was the tiebreaker. He was a great, very charismatic, nice guy, and that really broke the tie for me from between the two other firms I was looking at. And about 2 months into, and he took care of me and kept in touch with me till I started. And then when I started, he really looked out for me and guided me on many different occasions. But a couple months in, 2 to 3 months into the job, he walked into my office and he said, "Hey, I have some news. I'm leaving." And I was like, and literally, this is how clueless I was at the time. I was literally like, "Where are we going? What firm are we going to?" It's like, "No, you don't understand. I'm leaving. We're leaving." I'm like, "What happened to the, you and I?" And
he's like slowly backing out of the room.
Yeah. So, he explained to me that, this is what he was doing. So, I mean, and look, it worked out really well for me. So, I owe him for breaking that tie to come to General Atlantic. But I was literally like, "What are you talking about? Where are you leaving to?" So, and sometimes mentors can let you down, and he was doing what he needed to do that was right for him. But still, I was literally floored that we weren't going to be, married.
That's where you're cultivating resilience, Anton.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 30 seconds left. Really quickly, give us a piece of advice, the best piece of advice you've received.
Neil, do you want to go first, or you want me to go?
You go, Anton.
All right, the best piece of advice I've ever gotten was, it sounds like really sort of simple advice, but it's the best advice I've gotten by far, which is, again, one of my mentors said to me once, and at first I thought it was the dumbest piece of advice, and it's turned out to be the best piece of advice I got. He said, "People want to work with people they want to work with." And I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Of course people want to work with people they want to work with. But what he meant by that, and as he explained to me at the time, he basically said, be a nice person, have a good attitude. People want to work with people they like being around. And I would tell you, I have, in my professional career, maybe 25 or so years into it, nothing could be further from the truth. And it applies to the portfolio companies we work with. It applies to people that I hire. It's the people that are my peers. People want to work with people that they get along with. I mean, yes, they want smart and productive and some of the harder skills, but what they really want is also people they like. And so my number one piece of advice to those who are earlier in their careers or even later in their careers is, be a good person, have a good attitude, be someone that you'd want to work with. Don't try and be this really tough kind of, they're going to like this, really tough, mean, kind of jerky person. Like, that is a loser. I know sometimes you see that kind of person in the movies, maybe advance in their careers. At least in my experience, that person always, that's the reason people end up getting fired or not promoted. It's usually not a skills thing. Often not, it's just the person's not a cultural fit. Often not a cultural fit. The word for that is the person's kind of a jerk. And so, too political or, trying to hurt people. Just be a good person. Honestly, I really believe is like 40% of the game. So that's my number one piece of advice to folks.
Yeah, I'd agree to that one for sure. The airport test was one that one person that told me about, is if we had a layover at the airport, there was a big delay, would I actually want to get a beer with you right during that delay? And that speaks to Anton's point. And my other one during tough times, John, who got me into running marathons as well, taught me around not only getting through a marathon, but also when stuff gets difficult and hard, put one foot in front of the other. That's all you got to do. Don't look up that hill in Boston at the end, because you're going to get worried that you're not going to make it up the hill. But if you just focus on the next step, soon enough, you'll be at the top of that hill. And whenever things get really ugly, I go back to that, and it gets me sometimes up the hill, sometimes not, but it gives me a lot of mental clarity. So that's been helpful to me.
Speaking of finish lines, we are at one right now. I feel like we've won the Zoom lottery, having Neil and Anton on this call. I really appreciate the insights that you've shared with us. I think we got a lot out of it. And Sherry, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. I like how that sounded. Thank you, Michelle, Neil, Anton. Really, we can't thank you enough. And as you shared, it is very difficult to advance in your career or in life in general without mentorship. And there really is nothing more powerful than deep, authentic, mutually beneficial relationships. And I really believe during these times, genuine connection like that is so critical and can help us heal and really change in the long term. And this is our goal at StreetWise, to make sure that anyone, regardless of age, race, or zip code, has this kind of relationships. And so we hope you will get involved in our mission, either as a mentee, a volunteer, through funding, or even hiring our mentees. So we will keep the donation link in the chat box should you feel generous. And thank you again for everybody for joining us. Come be part of the StreetWise family. Have a wonderful evening.